Hi everybody, it's Think Differently Thursday again. My name's Helen, part of the Forge Church, and yeah, super lovely. I've got Justin here to chat to me. Hi Justin.
Hi, Helen of the Forge Church. This is Justin of the Forge Church.
We've had a bit of a nightmare before this call. I've got absolute light envy because you look so much better lit than me. And then I've been chasing a wasp around. Literally, we were about to start, weren't we? I've had a wasp. The wasp might reappear because I've tried to.
Yeah, so if you see a wasp, if we all see a wasp, I'll let Helen know, and then she'll cavort around her living room trying to kill it.
If I start yeah, Justin, if I start flapping around, you just keep talking, all right?
Yeah, okay.
So, wasp aside, I know a bit about you, Justin. I've been in a few groups with you at church. I did Alpha with you at church, but people may not know you. Just give us a little brief intro into who is Justin Smith.
Yeah. So, who am I?
Are you looking at notes to see who you are?
No, I'm just trying to think how because when someone asks who you are, it's kind of like the easiest thing to do is to describe what you do, isn't it? But
Job,
that's not
yeah.
necessarily. Yeah. So conventionally, I'm a father. I'm a husband. I've got three children in their twenties. My wife and I and our youngest child, Rachel, live in Crettingham. The two boys have moved on and left home, and one, David, lives in Ipswich, and Peter lives in Cambridge. Um, so yeah, and like everyone else, we've been far flung and not much in touch with people as normal. But so I work usually in Ipswich, but now from home. I work for Willis, the big, if you know Ipswich, there it's the big black glass building. I work on the ground floor there, and I sit in what was the deep end of the swimming pool because there used to be a swimming pool in that building.
I used to work there when there was a swimming pool. I used to swim in the swimming pool. Yes.
Right. Right. Well, the swimming pool was closed a long time ago, Helen, so you're showing your age.
Uh-oh. Yeah,
Yeah, they
I
boarded
went
it
on
over.
school trips. They were school trips.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where I work, and I go to the forge. And things I like doing. I have this weird hobby where I do tree work at weekends, and I do things like with the tree with the wood that I cut down, I make things. So I made this spoon recently,
That is
my first spoon that I made.
amazing.
So
At the
we think we.
weekend? You were making a
Uh,
bowl at the weekend as well, weren't
yeah,
you?
but the bowl is outside. I didn't think we could do enough of a show and tell in the interview to do that. So yeah, the bowl's outside getting wet, but the spoon is, I think, more or less finished. And
That is gorgeous. What are you going to do with it?
well, we're just going to use it. I mean, Nikki wants me to hang it on the wall, but I'm quite keen to use it as like a soup ladle or something.
Yeah, it's really nice. So, is this a hand tool thing, or have you got machinery that's doing this carving or whatever, how you've made your spoon?
It's all hand tools, and there's an example of a hand tool here.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a question mark. It's it's a tool. So I use that to get into the dig the bowl out.
Wow.
It's very sharp.
Wow.
This is cover. And yeah, but so I just love wood really. I've always loved wood and things because I grew up in the countryside.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it came from, I suppose, originally.
Yeah. Wow, that's super interesting.
Yeah, I don't
Really?
know. Is there anything else I need to divulge about me before we carry on?
Wow, it's up to you. We might drag it out of you as we go through. You shared a little bit of your story in our church service recently. We've just had a series, we've just finished a series called Curious. Yeah, and so you shared a bit. And so I think it was when I watched that evening, that Sunday morning, I thought, oh, it'd be really good to chat to you on Think Differently and just find out a bit more about you. I do love just delving into people's lives and finding out a little bit more. I love it that I've already found out about your woodwork, tree work. So tell us, Justin, where did life begin for you? Are you a Suffolk boy?
Well, life began for me. To be silly, my life began for me in my mummy's tummy.
Absolutely.
but I'm sure there'll be theologians who might want to question that statement. So yeah, I was born in Bedford. I was born in Bedford Hospital in 1966. It was after the World Cup.
World Cup. That's what I know about
Yeah.
66. World Cup.
And yeah, and then as a family we moved. So I'm one of three. I've got two brothers, and I'm in the middle. And
Same as me, middle child.
yeah, there's a real syndrome, isn't there?
Wow.
Apparently.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever had it because, unlike you, I'm middle and I've got two brothers as well. So, like, I'm the only girl. So that's my thing.
Yeah,
I'm the girl. But you are the middle child of.
yeah. So
How was it?
you would have been protected by your two brothers, and I was just fighting with mine.
I had some pretty good fights as well.
Yeah.
I would literally draw blood with my fights.
Would you?
Yeah, with my nails.
Oh, right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that happened once with my older brother. His name's Matthew. So my dad was from the building industry. All his life was spent in the carpentry, building kind of with wood and things. But he
Oh,
bought he bought all this material home from work, and we started building our own house. It took us 10 years at weekends and bank holidays to
wow.
literally pour the concrete in. My mum's got pictures of her wheelbarrowing the concrete in the footings to this house, and we built it slowly. And during that time, one day I had a hammer in my hand because I was the one who's asked to do all the denailing. Because my dad bought this wood home that was from jobs that he'd done,
Right. Yeah.
and it was second hand. So we used to take all the nails out, and so I got quite good with a hammer. And my older brother, for some reason, put his finger on this bit of wood, and I don't know what it was, but he was saying, well, I'm not going to move it. And I said, well, if you don't move it, you're just going to get hit. So it was a bit of a standoff. And I said, here it comes. And he wasn't moving his finger because he was convinced I wouldn't do it. I just brought the hammer down on it. Bash. So yeah, that's quite a few of those things went on. We also did, oh gosh, things we did like stealing my mum's car and go joyriding in it and then put it back without her knowing. Some things I did that I probably shouldn't repeat in this conversation. But yeah, all sorts of things.
I think with the fighting, like me and my older brother, we had proper fisticuffs fights. But my two didn't do that kind of fighting. Did your children do proper?
No, they never.
No, mine didn't.
Because I suppose we've got two boys and a girl. I don't know whether that changes the dynamic.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
they all get on absolutely fantastically, and there's never been anything like that. Not that I know of, anyway.
So 3 boys, but you've described that a little bit. Was it happy kind of growing up, happy family life?
Yeah, mostly happy. I think one of the things that I look back on and think it seemed normal at the time, but we all travelled absolutely. We lived on the Ashdown Forest. So after Bedfordshire, we moved down to East Sussex.
Okay.
And the place we had was a really run-down little bungalow. We built the house next to it, and in that time, me and my older brother went to school every day, 20 miles away.
Wow.
So we used to get up at crazy o'clock and then, short trousers and things, and get on the train and then get to the other end and walk another mile to our schools. It was like a real massive journey every day. Did it in both directions. And then my younger brother, Chris, That's
my younger brother's name as well.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
He was at the same school, but he was boarding, so it was like a boys' school most of the time. And Chris boarded, and Matthew and I went to and from every day. So that was, my parents wanted us all to go to the same school, but the school quite snooty about academic qualifications to get into the school. So if you didn't get the one exam, you had to go in as a boarder or not at all. It was really old-fashioned.
Okay.
And it was so that was a kind of a weird thing, I think.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of math.
Different experience for you.
Yeah. So
the same experience.
Yeah, it was really good most of the time, but I think it would have been even better if Chris had been there a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Wow.
Yeah.
And
So we did all sorts of naughty things, and most of which my parents don't know about. But um,
And are your
yeah,
parents still about, Justin?
they are. Yeah, my
Mm,
my dad and mum,
okay,
they live in Seaford on the
okay.
south coast near Eastbourne.
So interesting that your dad was in the sort of line of work that, in a sense, you have as a bit of a hobby nowadays with all of your woodwork.
Yeah, yeah. I sent him photos, all
Do
mad things I
you?
do. Yeah, and
Ah,
he'll
nice.
sort of critique them and make suggestions.
And didn't he have a really interesting start to life? You were telling me as a baby.
Yeah, so I don't know much about it, and it's kind of something that we don't talk about much because I don't think my dad wants to dwell on it a huge
Yeah,
amount. But he doesn't he never really knew his real mum and dad. He When he was born, it was in a situation where I think it was a classic kind of situation where the housemaid and the master of the house um, produced my dad,
yeah,
and the Irish housemaid went back to Ireland, you know, with all the sort of stigma and shame maybe
yeah.
associated with that, and the his father, um, I don't know what the circumstances were exactly, but he was basically just not wanted really, or you know, looked after by was picked up by a local woman in Bedfordshire called Grace Smith. So that's where the Smith surname comes from. I don't really know what my dad's surname was. I think I knew
Right,
once, but I've forgotten. So
right.
I might be some, you know, I don't know. It might be I might be someone who would inherit £1 billion or something. Helen, you don't know, do you?
Don't I? You're not kind of tempted to do the investigation into the long lost
No,
family thing.
no, because my dad's. I'd rather it was all coming from my dad, really, and
Yeah,
he's never really. I think he very much has this, you know, has a clear view in his mind as to who his mum is.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Mm. And so, was it a home where faith was evident? Did you have any early experiences of faith, or being around people of faith? What was your family set up as far as, was there any faith there?
Well, it's interesting, really, because nothing really stood out as a thing for us as an immediate family. But I suppose there's always a bigger context, isn't there? So the bigger context being my dad's adopted mother was a real chapel goer in
Okay,
Bedfordshire. So she'd go to chapel. I don't know what chapel it was, but it would be, you know, probably 3 times on Sunday, that kind of thing. And he was sort of taken along, and so he kind of and my mother was probably from an Anglican sort of background where she'd be going along, and she actually goes to church now, and my mum, but my dad doesn't, and so there's obviously been something in that in their history, but really in the day to day life, as for me as a lad with my two brothers, there wasn't really any of that, except the school we went to did all the sort of perfunctory, you know,
okay,
assembly hymns, which we changed the words to, and all that, and all the things you did when you were, I guess, our age at school that was
yeah,
normal.
yeah,
But it was very much kind of society norms rather than
okay,
knowing Jesus kind of thing.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, a functional sort of thing.
yeah, but I can
Yeah,
remember the name of one person's name came to mind today when I was just thinking about going back over my life, really. But there was a guy called Garth Hewitt who's
yep.
actually still alive. I don't know him.
Musician, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Singer.
he's a Christian musician singer, and
Yeah.
he had an album that came out at the time when I was probably in my teens, called Garth Hewitt. Did he jump or was he pushed?
I remember. Yeah.
And for some reason, I remember seeing a poster and a flyer about that. And I don't know, I might be inventing this, but I might have gone along to a concert or something. I can't really remember, but it's only afterwards that I found out that was a Christian thing. So it was, yeah. So on the face of it, there was pretty much nothing, but I did occasionally get dragged along to Sunday school in
Okay.
the neighbouring village, and I think it was mostly because it was something to do on a
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
Sunday or whatever it
Yeah.
was.
Well, they
And
were days, weren't they, where nothing else was happening on a Sunday. I
yeah,
know that lots of my friends, I mean, we belonged to a church, but lots of my friends would come to Sunday school or youth groups or things that were going on at the church. I think the church was a place where it was quite an acceptable thing for kids to go along to,
yeah,
wasn't it, at that
yeah.
time? I think
I
it
sort
wasn't
of,
unusual.
cynically, I kind of think it was a good way to get rid for the
Yeah,
afternoon. And
bit of childcare for parents. Yeah.
that's probably unfair, but I don't remember anything massively standing out at all. Can't remember anything about it except we went to what I called a nice lady's house. There was about 5 or 6 of us in her living room, and she talked about stuff. And I used to think she was just really nice. She's a really kind person, and yeah, so it was more of an impression of kindness than
Yeah.
anything else, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Interesting. Okay, and so you talked a little bit about school and maybe little tiny bits of faith that presented themselves there. And after school, you headed north, didn't you, to go to uni? Is that right?
yeah. Well, it wasn't university. It was I did
Okay.
a degree, but it was in the because I really did very badly in my A levels. So they are still called A levels, aren't they? I think yes, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I scraped into a college of higher education
Okay.
called Humberside College of Higher Education, which was just next door to Hull University.
Right.
So you kind of existed in this student bubble with all the students together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a 4-year degree in business information systems, so it's like business with IT.
Okay.
And it was one of the first degrees, apparently, of its kind to combine those two disciplines, because
Right.
that's going back a long time now. And yeah, I did this. I did my placement in Bracknell, and in year 3, and then in year 4 was in the last 3 weeks of the term. That's where I met Nikki, my wife, and a crew of her friends who were neighbours to me. So it
Okay.
was literally 3 weeks before I would have left Hull, never really going back there, that we met each other.
Was it love at first sight?
It was, yeah, I think it genuinely was. I hope Nikki would say the same.
Oh, I'm going to
um,
ask her.
yeah, and they were all Christians, and all had this this kind of quality or set of qualities that I couldn't really grab hold of.
Okay.
This is what I was sharing at the Forge the other day. It's my phone.
Yeah. Is someone going to get it?
It's just going to ring
We'll
for a bit.
just ignore it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you talked about that when you talked at the Forge about coming across these Christians and there being something about them. I mean, what was it that you were? What was it? What were you seeing in this group of people that perhaps you hadn't come across before then, or was different?
So one of the first things was I was completely disarmed by my sort of stereotypical view, I suppose, of a Christian. Not that The Simpsons was actually on TV at the time, but it
Right.
would be whoever that character is on The Simpsons.
Ned Flanders. Is it
Yeah, it
Ned
would be
Flanders?
there'd be bearded, sandal wearing, kind of embarrassing people who just spoke in a kind of funny voice and just quoted the Bible all day long. Was my kind of my sort of perception of it, and but they weren't like that at all. They weren't judgmental. They were open. They were welcoming. They were relaxed. There was a peace about them. There was no. I guess these are words I might have added on or qualified in my mind since, but there was no sense of self-righteousness about them at all.
Mm.
So they weren't sort of, looking at me and saying and judging me for the things I did or didn't do, and then comparing me with them and doing a sort of thing where somehow they had got some sort of qualification in life, that I hadn't. It was very much just accepting me. I felt accepted, and I felt
Mm,
like I could sort of almost like spread my wings in the conversation with them,
okay.
go to places with them, because there was a real sense of safety about it.
Mm,
I thought, which,
mm,
because I'm used to sort of like interactions with people before that of much more almost a sort of semi-competitive nature, and a bit more sort of like guarded about
okay.
what's their agenda and how open can I be, and
Mm, mm,
some trust issues which we all probably develop in life,
mm,
don't we, with sort
mm,
of, being let down, or whatever words you want to use.
mm.
And I think I felt like my guard was being let down, and I felt like there wasn't going to be any kind of trap in it, if that makes sense. It was
Felt
just
safe.
like a really safe thing to do. So
Mm,
I guess that, and a lot of that's sort of unspoken, isn't it? Because it's just
yeah,
more
a feeling.
observing than it
Yeah.
is kind
But
of
definitely
resolving.
sounds like something that you were attracted to, something that you saw that you found attractive in them.
Yeah, there's a real, very much attractiveness to it, and a real graciousness about them. That, I mean, the
Mm,
word grace is something that you sort of, I used to think, oh, I used to think of that as being something that a ballerina has, or
mm,
someone who can gracefully execute something. But I started to see, if you like, see grace in them without realizing that's what it was.
yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
so there's a lot of these things I couldn't really put words to any of it.
No.
And of course, when you become a Christian, gradually you start to get this vocabulary from the Bible, where you suddenly it becomes a lot clearer.
Yeah. But
Uh,
interesting that at the stage before you put that vocabulary around it, there was something that kind of drew you to those people because of what you saw in them.
yeah, they were the first group of people I'd ever come across who really arrested me in their interactions with each other, their disposition towards me, welcoming of me, non-judgmental.
Mm,
We turned up with like booze in great big carrier bags, and they were just, it was just a really good sort of fun social occasion for them. And yes, they might have had a couple of glasses of wine or something, but it wasn't a, oh, let's all get pissed. It was very
mm,
much like the clashing of two cultures, when because me and
mm,
my housemates were all, sort of heathens, and this lot of people
mm.
were the opposite. But somehow I think that they um, they kind of like didn't need to be any kind of confrontation and sort of like
Yeah.
combative
Yeah.
conversations about faith, because um, yeah, I don't know what that just didn't really come up. We played Scruples, the game
Yeah.
Scruples, where it
Yeah.
asks you questions like, if you hit a car in a car park, and then what would you do? Would you drive away as fast as you can, or stick a sticker on the window, or whatever? And we'd always give like the most outlandish answers just to try and wind them up, and they'd give the answers that were just seemed like what they would naturally do, and they were
Yeah.
always like the perfect answers.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, it caused conversation. And I remember going for walks with Nikki on the beach afterwards over the weeks, and just sort of between me and her, really getting to the next level of detail, I suppose, of me sharing my thoughts and myself and because obviously we got on so well that there was something else that then happened where I could really almost like, I remember being really not angry with her, but just being angry on the beach, shouting about why it was that what they had seemed to be completely out of my reach. And I
mm,
still had this perception that to be a Christian there was something you had to do,
mm. Right.
and that you had to, almost like, the Stairway to Heaven
Mm,
song. There's
mm,
all, it's like, surely there has to be something you do
mm,
as an achievement,
mm,
almost like scouts badges or something.
mm.
And of course, there's the thing that's baffling is there's not,
It's done. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just so hard to. What was for me, the penny didn't drop on that for quite a long time. That
Mm,
um, yeah, and so it was only through Nikki really bearing the brunt of all that kind of rubbish that I came
Mm.
out with,
Mhm.
that I got to the point where I was then faced with really, before I went across to America, which is what I did next, like, for a while, I knew there was a decision that was pending. What
Okay.
and I had
So did you when you went off to America, did you shelve all of that temporarily or put it on the back burner, or did you kind of come to a decision about it, or was it still mulling all around, or how did you kind of move on with that?
so in so there's this thing called British Universities North America Club, BUNAC, where you can either go and do BUNAC as Camp America, which I always laugh about that, or or Work America. And I thought, I don't like the sound of Camp America, so I'm going to go to Work America. Work America was where an equal number of students from the UK with an equal number of students from the US, just the two governments just agree there'll just be like a swap for, I
Yeah.
think it's 3 months or maybe 6 months, I forget now. So you go across there, that's it. You're on your own, zero help. Maybe if you lost your passport, you could go and ask for help at the local, you know.
Sounds terrifying.
But you find your own, work. Find a
Yeah.
place to live. So I opened a bank account, got two jobs within 2 days of being there, and lived in Boston in a basement with two Irish sisters, not sisters as in nuns, sisters as in just sisters,
Mhm.
who were Catholics, and a Jewish guy. So there was this Jewish guy, me, and these two Catholic sisters in this basement, and we
Right.
were all, and it was just such a mix up. So yeah, and conversations about God came from every angle,
Right.
which had never, and even on the radio, when I drove across, having worked these two jobs for a few months, I then drove from east to west coast, and everybody I met, it seemed to me as though everyone I met was a Christian or had different values to me. Like, and I guess America does have that about it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
the time.
So did
And
that
every
mean that
radio
that was
station,
was that kind of then sparking loads more conversations and questions with those people?
yeah, it's I mean, I think one particular thing happened because I was so busy working. I did like 16 hours a day work, so a lot of
Okay.
the time it was just like work or sleep. But I remember on the streets of Boston when I got myself a sandwich, there was a bunch of Christians doing a kind of a mission, if you like, and singing and playing guitars in the middle of Boston, and that I just had to go and speak to them, and that kind of brought back all these same thing about the Christians in Hull. Really, it was
Yeah.
that whole graciousness, openness, welcoming, non-judgmental, and all these things that were the same. So I think there wasn't the same intensity of conversation as there had been with Nikki and the friends in Hull, because I kind of was travelling through the States really.
Yeah.
But it was like I felt God was hemming me in. God was sort of, I felt like he was on my case, as it were,
Right.
although I might not have used those words at the
Yeah.
time.
But how interesting that you just kept coming across people that then
Yeah,
kind of promoted more of those conversations. Amazing. And so
yeah.
you came back, and then did you do anything with it? Did you do anything more kind of to explore faith?
I did, yeah. I just, because, Nikki met me at the airport. I got to know her parents. I was working in southwest London in Wimbledon because I came straight back to a job that I'd been offered when I was on placement. So I worked in Wimbledon, and Nikki was. By the way, Nikki had ME when I met her.
Oh, really?
If people know what ME is,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah. So and yeah, so she was living at home in She had moved back to Romford, where her parents are from, and
Oh,
where she
mine
taught.
too. That's where my
Oh,
parents
okay.
are from.
Another thing in common. So I'll do that commute from, well, sort of, weekends from Wimbledon to Romford,
Okay.
which, if on the district line, is quite a long journey.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I decided that a friend of mine who was an agnostic, who became my best man for the wedding for me and Nikki, a guy called David, he, I've been childhood friends with him, and he said to me, "Hey Justin, I'm going to go to St Helen's Church in Bishopsgate," because he was working in London too, And they're doing this thing called, they do these two things. They do a thing called Read, Mark, Learn, and they do a thing called Discovering Christianity. And I said, oh, because I was really good friends with him. He was going along out of pure curiosity, and he wasn't a Christian, and still isn't a Christian. But he was going along almost out of intellectual curiosity.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was going to do the advanced kind of read, mark, learn thing where they work their way through a book of the Bible in a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, I think Discovering Christianity sounds more like the level that I'm at. So I signed up to do that. And then sort of, I think before it actually started, Nikki got to know that I'd signed up for that because I was going to try and do it in secret without her knowing.
Yeah.
Because what I didn't want to do was sort of like, if I was going to really dig into this and then find out more about what I call find out more about it, I didn't want it to be on the basis of the fact that I liked Nikki. I wanted it to be because I wanted to, dig into it, as it were. So, so it was 12-week course, which kind of overran by a few months. And Nikki actually came on the course with me, which is good. And there's a key person on that course. I mean, throughout my life, there's been key people. I think one of the key people there. So the key guy in Hull was Raymond Evans, who asked me over for the barbecue with my mates. The key person in London at St Helens was Martin Shea, who's now the Reverend Martin Shea. He somewhere in the Channel Islands. He runs a church there.
Okay.
And he was the guy who just took it to the next level and opened the Bible up and really took the group through quite a lot of the New Testament really in the end after 18 months.
Right.
And people started gradually kind of what I'd said dropping like flies. We were sort of, I presented myself as an atheist when the course started, even though actually I really felt like I was an atheist with some serious challenges already from the conversations with Nikki and co.
Yeah.
And I was there to sort of like poo-poo it all and refute it all. Yeah. And then after 4 weeks, I became a Christian.
Wow.
And I was on the tube train on the way home from the district line between Putney East and Putney Bridge, going across the Thames or something. And I remember just blurting out in kind of like under my breath that I kind of just gave up to God. I said, look, this is just so true and real.
Yeah.
Through all the things we looked at on the course and all the evidence for the resurrection and all the things that the Christians had been, if you like, in their lives, I thought there isn't anything about this that isn't real, and I just need to throw my trust into. So I just kind of gave up in many ways and just said, look, I just don't know what I don't know, but I think I know enough to say this is just true. I've got to, and I didn't know what to say really, or what, there wasn't any. They hadn't got to the bit on the course where they tell you how to pray the prayer. So,
so great though, because I think sometimes people feel that they've got to. My phone rang last time I did one of these. Sometimes I think people feel that they've got to get their life to a certain place, or they've got to do something, or got to get all sorted. Whereas I think what you're saying is that you came to that decision not with all of the answers, not with even necessarily understanding it all, but just coming to a place of knowing that that's what you wanted to do, that you wanted to begin this life with being in relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of felt like almost a nail in the coffin really was that, the thing I said earlier on about thinking that I had to do things to enter this place where I could have what they had, or words to that effect.
Yeah.
And I sort of realised that in the end, having, coupled with looking at the resurrection and the whole thing about it's all of God's doing and nothing of our doing, and it's all about his grace and his mercy, I kind of realised that I wasn't in any way, shape or form going to have any ability to sort of drum up this goodness within me. You know, it just wasn't there. There was no place to draw it from, really. And so and then you sort of look at the other lives that I'd been talking to, and so on, Nikki with her friends. I thought they've got that, and it wasn't through their doing, because that's not what they've been saying. So it just, it was kind of like quite a few a mishmash of things that happened, really, to bring me to that conclusion. But for me, it was very much quite a logical sort of, like, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to disprove it, or I'm going to do something, it was one of those things where I realised that it's facts that are the foundation for faith.
Yeah.
And I needed that to be true. I didn't want this. I couldn't believe there could just be this complete sort of, with zero basis of evidence or anything else, just leaping into the dark. I felt like even if there was an element of leaping into some kind of next step, there had to be something to launch from. And I was so relieved when I found that there was, masses of evidence for that to be a firm footing.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point about what you're saying about that kind of feeling like it felt strange that it wasn't something that you had to do, because I think at times that is what holds people back, feeling like they've got to work towards something or earn it, or that it's something about what they do. This whole idea of, like, actually Jesus' death and resurrection is what he has done, and he has done it all. I think sometimes that's hard for people to deal with at times, but sounds like you kind of resolved that in your mind.
I think it really helped to have not just the Bible and the evidence that presented, but to have that almost like some flesh, if you like, you could see it in the flesh with the people that I met. And the pages of the book were lined up with that.
Are you still in contact with all of those people?
Raymond and Helen, they kind of come round as soon as COVID clears and stay with us. And Martin and Liz Shea, I haven't actually been in touch with them for probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years actually. And I was thinking, I've got to try and I sent Martin a LinkedIn request.
Right.
I'm yet to hear whether he's going to accept it. I don't think he uses LinkedIn very much. But I'd really like to go back to that and re-establish that connection. It's probably been a long time, really, since I last spoke to him.
And what about the guys at uni? I guess they were Nikki's friends initially, mostly. Those people you first met, are you in contact with them?
So we're in contact mostly with Raymond and Helen, but also
were then. Okay.
Yeah, also with a couple called Sean and Mel, who lived Mel lived in the same house as Nikki, and also a lady called Jane, who also lived in the same house as Nikki.
Okay.
And still lives in Hull.
Yeah.
So we're in touch with some of them. I mean, not all of them, but yeah.
I mean, I think they're to be applauded, aren't they? Because I think they've been so significant in the story and in sort of dispelling some of those kind of preconceived ideas you had about what Christians were, really.
Yeah.
I think it was in this last Sunday when we concluded the Curious series that Steve kind of almost put out the invitation almost about, and I think he worded it like about this life adventure that Jesus calls us all to. Is that how you would describe what your life as a Christian has been, being a life of adventure because of Jesus? Would you be able to pick out highlights, as it were, that you would completely attribute to the fact that you made a decision all those years ago to become a Christian?
Yeah, I just need to think about keeping it to a few examples, but So I suppose taking a step back, so kind of work-wise, before this happened, I was on the sort of trajectory I thought to be. I don't know. I was very, very, because of this degree that I did, and I was really very keen to start my own business and become a sort of software entrepreneur.
Okay.
That was that was, and I joined a very small team at Hewlett Packard in my placement that spun themselves out into a startup company, and they offered me to become a director of that company when I was like 24 or something stupid after my degree. And I think if I hadn't, there was always reasons this actually occurred. This almost like circumstances to start my own business or to step into that world of um, whatever that would have implied or taken me to. That's happened probably I think 3 times in my life since, and I've always through for different reasons ended up not taking that up, and
Okay.
I'm convinced that because I mean first time round we went to India instead. I
Okay.
was offered this yeah. So sorry, the second time around I was offered I could have absolutely started my own business with some funding and even employed people from the get go. Um, and then this opportunity came up to go to India. Um, and after lots of sort of searching and thinking about it, just we decided to that sort of sense of peace and certainty that comes after wrestling with something, and it just wasn't there with the business opportunity,
Right.
but it was there in like just massive relief, if you like, of certainty that although it seemed like contrary to logic, it was the right thing to do to go to India when Nikki was pregnant. So I suppose one of the big adventures we had was that of sort of saying no to this business venture and saying and um, walking away from work actually,
Yeah.
and renting the house out and going to India through a connection we had in this country who knew the situation in this rural part of North India near the Tibetan border, and just yeah, it just felt so incredibly right. And there was a photo of us standing at Heathrow Airport with Nikki pregnant, probably I think 4 or 5 months pregnant.
Wow.
There was a bump,
Yeah.
and then my parents and Nikki's parents, sort of standing either side of us, and it's like the look on their faces is quite something, because Nikki's parents are Christians and my
Yeah.
parents are. Well, I've described their situation,
Yeah.
um, but we just knew that we knew that we knew that it was the right thing to do,
Yeah.
and that's what came out of that was for me was the next thing in India where David was born towards the end of our stay in Manali, this little town called Manali. During that time, we were there to volunteer in a hospital, and I just cutting it short, I got there. I worked with another company in elsewhere in India first, and that other company paid me in kind with a computer. So a big, like not just a laptop, but a big, like old box computer.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was then taken by bus from Delhi for 18 hours on the bus in the pouring rain on the roof of the bus up to Manali. And when arrived in Manali, we were there waiting to receive it. And I unpacked it, dried it out, and then it had a virus. So we then took the bus. I took the bus all the way back to get the virus taken off in Delhi and sorted out, and then back up to Manali again. It's like this massive long journey. The reason I'm just going into that is because it was so impactful for this hospital that was on the brink of closure and really struggling. That to bring a computer into their world and to have the possibility of starting to do a patient record system and those sort of things in this rural setting in hospital. And that's where we met Largie and Sheila, who
Mm.
I've mentioned on the church prayer thing, because Largie got COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I can't share my screen with you, can I, very easily without messing around? Or can I?
You can if you want to, yeah.
Can I try?
I just need to make you a co-host, don't I?
Okay.
I think.
Because I just want to show a photo.
There you go. You're the host now.
So I think adventures in the context of being a Christian are always done, well, in my experience, that they're done with God's people, aren't they? It's like you're not flying solo. It's a team effort. Yeah. And so I just want to give, if I share my screen, share that. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a picture of Largy. His real name is George Varghese, or Dr. George Varghese. His wife is Dr. Sheila Varghese. This is the next key couple in our lives.
Okay.
And he, you see that? Can you see that sort of tube?
Yep. Yeah.
He's got his glasses on and his mask, but he's also got a tube there.
Yeah.
That is oxygen being administered to him as he is operating on a patient.
Wow.
Because Largy's got long COVID.
Oh, wow.
I think he's been cleared of COVID, as in he's tested negative, but he's got the sort of like the after effects of that.
Right, yeah.
And he can't breathe very easily, and he's been sent home to recuperate. But him being Largy, he's decided that it's now time he gets back into operating on people.
Oh, wow.
So just hats off to the guy, really, that he's got that faith and that determination and that sort of like calling on his life to help these people in this rural setting.
Yeah.
They're the only hospital for it's the middle of nowhere. It's it's 18 hours by bus to Delhi, and the nearest real medical facilities are kind of that sort of distance away. So this hospital is serving all these people in this rural part of India.
Wow.
And is a real lovely Christian who will talk to the patients about Jesus. And I was able to help him in the operating theatre. I'd pump the gas and air.
Really?
All that sort of thing. And then in the church, they had a little church on the campus. They'd asked me to preach, and I'd sort of, after I gulped a lot, I'd preach and in English, and then it would be translated into 3 other languages,
right?
Because of the Tibetan and Hindi, and then the local dialect of Kulu. It's called the Kulu Valley, so there's lots of different dialects and languages. So you'd say one sentence, and then it would be translated by 3 different translators into different languages.
Yeah.
That was just a massive privilege, Helen. It was.
Sounds incredible. And certainly, in answering that question about a life of adventure, that sounds like it was an incredible adventure. Yeah. And
I think really the biggest adventure, really, isn't it, is that whole our relationship actually with Jesus when there's no one. When the doors close and there's no one watching, it should be the case that we get all of us, if you like, come from that relationship, from that sort of fountain, that water, if you like, the water that's there with Jesus. And sometimes that hasn't been true for me in my Christian life. That I've not been always very consistent in my times, realizing that it's Jesus' work on the cross and what he did that enabled me to make that decision. Actually, you look back on it and you think you're making a decision for Christ, but he's calling you in, isn't he? And he's got you, and it's just like, it's almost the opposite of what you think. And everything in the universe centers around him. It doesn't center around me or you or any of us. It's kind of, so it's that challenge to myself is, and probably for all Christians, isn't it? Is to, that place of real adventure is when there's no one watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to an extent, there's a bit of that going on now, because we can't do church in the way that we have previously been doing church. We haven't been all coming together. And so I think in a sense, it has shone a light on what our relationship with God is, because a lot of what we tie up with relationship with God, the coming together, the singing together, the hearing stuff together, the serving together, all those things that I think are part and parcel of our faith. But when a lot of those have been taken away, I think it has enabled a lot of us to see what is my relationship with Jesus when all of that has been taken away. And I think you're right. It comes back to, what is it? What are we putting into it? What are we experiencing in that relationship? And you're saying that it sometimes it's been better than at other times, and sometimes it's been harder. What would you say are the components that make those times good, when faith and relationship with God has been really good? What has been the kind of what has been in place then that has made it such?
I still think there's so many challenges to, I'd say, to the thought life, isn't it? Our thought life, my thought life, still, our default, our norm is to, make everything center around us and to think about ourselves and to make decisions that are sort of, selfish or the opposite of the fact that we're Christians. It's kind of like there's a battle, isn't there, if you like? And I think the bit where you can really see the hand of God is when you don't have anything in your hands, when you really have empty hands, and maybe when you're in a place where you've made some mistakes, you've sort of come out of something, and you realise, like there was, me and Largie had a time where we weren't really speaking very much, and for a couple of years there was sort of like very little communication going back and forth, and I realised that it was my doing in that was wrong, and it's only been in the last little while that where I've gone to him and asked him to forgive me for that, because I found distance was a thing that was difficult in the relationship, but he so graciously just said, "Just in your place, it's never been taken by anyone else."
Oh.
So I think if we're willing to just go to God saying, "Look, I don't have the answers," and I'm willing to go to God and other people to say sorry for things that I'm not doing or have done wrong, and also where times seem like they're hard, that's where God really, that's where the kind of the plane lands on the tarmac, isn't it? And that's where, do you stay in that place of faith, or do you run to your kind of default zone, of finding solutions in your own strength and things? And I think we all struggle with that. It's still very real, and I think almost like it's still very real, because we know as we go through life that we learn that lesson over and over again, that actually the safest place, the best place, the place of most sort of like positivity and energy and truth is Jesus. And I have to keep kind of like relearning that all the time. I have to hear the gospel. Who was it? He used to have the gospel. He used to have the book of Romans read to him every day. I forget who it was now. Someone in history, years in ancient history. It's like we have to just hear the good news, hear it and rehear it, and not think we've mastered it. Put it in our back pocket. Jesus is not a back pocket God, is he? He is God. So I'm answering your question in a very kind of convoluted fashion.
No,
What's your
good.
question?
No, it's good. The question was like, in a sense, when relationship with God has been good, what would you put that down to?
Yeah, so circumstances, sometimes my own mistakes, my own stupidity, and coming back to him, hard times, other circumstances where there is a situation where you need to either rush in and just be there for someone and help them, or just kind of leave them to their own difficulties. And it's like that wisdom to know, when to do that and when not to, and when to leave others to, and all that. But just identifying with people's crises rather than just being this sort of self-contained. The Bible talks, doesn't it, about the Bible says about how we can, weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn and get alongside people. And I think Jesus is a man of compassion, and that he says, follow me. And so it's almost like the rest of our lives he's kind of working out some of these things that he says.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there's almost opportunities all the time. Every day there's opportunities, but are we blind to them, or are we open to them? He who has eyes to see, can he see, and ears to hear, can we hear? So I think it's almost like it's when life is all serene and calm and cushy that actually I drift away from God. And when there's adversity of some kind, either disrupted because of my stupidity, someone else's circumstances, my circumstances, where you have to actually trust God, that then you start to, especially you then have a growing experience of him, and he leads you into places where you'd otherwise not go.
Yeah. I think, you're very wise, Justin. I think you've shared loads of really good insight for us. I'm sure people will really benefit from listening to what you have to say, whether that be people perhaps that have no experience of faith, maybe people that are exploring faith, or people that are a long way down the path on their journey of faith. I think you've got lots to say to all those different people. And we've said it a lot recently, but if any of this resonates with people that are listening today and we can help, then put something in the comments. We'll get back to you, or contact us at info@forgechurch.com, or me, helen.bolton at forgechurch.com. Anything, we'd really like to help you as you explore faith. And I'm sure you too, Justin, would happily chat to anybody that wanted to talk some of this stuff through.
I'd absolutely love to. Yeah.
I've got one last question for you, and finally question. So in our Curious series, which was very much for people that were exploring faith, really, and just encouraging people to consider a life with God, if you had a strapline for Christianity to encourage people to take that step of faith that you took when you kind of made that decision to go from being inquisitive to committing your life to this, what would your strapline be?
So I'm just going to go with play it really safe, and we get a book out.
Okay.
It's called This Book. And it's like not even on a phone, Helen. This is like
it's like a real book. I remember those books.
Yeah. And there's a book in here, a book in this book, because this book is made up of books, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think the verse as a strapline. The best straplines are the ones
you remember
that you can read in only a few words, but you need to unpack them a bit afterwards.
Yeah.
So there's
You're
a book
building it up really well. You're building it up well.
I hope it comes across okay. So there's an experiment here. This is a book called Romans, and so it's Saint Paul, or Paul, writing to Christians in Rome, and it's chapter 4, verse 25. It's talking about Jesus. So it says, Jesus was delivered over to death for our sins and was raised to life for our justification. So you could paraphrase that by saying it's like an exchange. Jesus took away our rubbish and gave us his life so that we can live to God.
Yeah.
And it's all about Jesus. And that is so much in that verse. It's so short, but if you can unpack it a bit and ask questions about it, that is the gospel. That is the good news about Jesus in that one sentence.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. I've really enjoyed finding out more about you, finding out things we've got in common, finding out things I didn't know about you at all, and just love your story and love the way that you're able to share your faith as well. So thank you so much for chatting to me today and giving me that time. It's been really, really lovely. Thank you.
One last thing, Helen. There, I don't think there's been a wasp at all. I think you might have killed it.
No, I haven't, because while we're talking, every so often I can hear this, like, it's like this tapping. I think it's behind me somewhere. It's just like tapping.
It's going to come and get you as you sleep.
It's about.
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been lovely to chat to you. Thank you for joining me. See you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.